Look, it's working this week, Brian.
I'm not saying a word.
I think it's working.
I will curse nothing.
Is it or not? We can always count on our faithful in the chat room to let us know that it's working or not. It looks good to me. Yep. All right.
Feeling good?
I'm feeling good. Let's do it. Are you ready?
Alyssa said nothing is working.
Oh,
And
great.
then a smiley face. Okay.
Thanks, Alyssa.
Yeah.
BRB. Welcome to the Midlife Pilot Podcast. This is a podcast all about flying and aviation and learning to fly in midlife. And that's what it is. My name is Chris Moran. I'm known as the Midlife Pilot on YouTube. I'm joined by my illustrious co-host, Brian Siskin from Deep in the Heart of Music Row. And we're excited about this week, episode number 36. We got a special guest going to be joining us here in just a few minutes, and we'll talk a lot more about him as we get going. But it is great to see you tonight, Brian.
Yeah, man. How's it going? I like your scenery there. Your Zoom background looks so real.
It's getting really good, isn't it? It's going to change dramatically over the next hour as the lighting conditions change.
That's so authentic, and it'll have little planes that go by and the sounds and all that.
Yep, we should.
No, that's great. But yeah, so yeah, good to see you. I'm doing fine. I'm going through withdrawals because my plane's been in annual for a while and autopilot install for a while, and it's kind of tough.
Yeah,
it's like been such an incredible stretch of weather here, and you know,
I have the opposite situation. After not flying hardly at all for a very long time, I've actually had 2 flights in the last couple of weeks since we last potted together. One of them I did not video. Took my daughter over to Parkersburg, West Virginia, to actually get her TSA pre-check appointment done. As we're getting ready for our Oshkosh trip in July. She turned 18, and so she can't go with me on my pre-check anymore. And I'm like, I am not standing in security lines with you in Chicago on the way back. So we got that all squared away. It was a beautiful day for that flight. And then I know you all are shocked. I published a video in the last week.
Yes.
Of a quick flight in the 235, and we talked all about VOR navigation and engine leaning with the JPI engine monitor, and so check that out on the channel if you haven't seen it yet. But it's that was a fun flight with my friend Tyler. So yeah, been flying a little bit.
Well, so a lot of people here remember when I told the story of that I was renting an airplane from flight school here at John Toon, and in early March the sustained sort of wind event that we had turned that plane on its head, and also my ability to fly was turned on its head, which has led to some good things in the end. Now I'm part owner in a plane that I can't fly, so that's awesome because it's in maintenance. But I have to say, and I'm not sure if I really explained it, but the arrangement for that plane was a very unique and special thing, and I think that it's a real testament to have people that run flight schools that have visions to do things a little differently. You see a lot of the baseline stuff running and people just are kind of doing the normal thing. This was a very unique situation in that rental plane, and obviously it didn't work out because of the weather, but it wasn't the owner's fault or the school's fault. But the cool thing is we have that that flight school owner here with us as a guest today on the Midlife Pilot Podcast. And so I just want to welcome my friend Jeff Ramsey to the podcast.
Hey guys.
Hello.
So Jeff runs Frequency Change Aviation, which is based here out of John Toon. And I think that one of the things I want to get into really quickly with Jeff is there are other flight schools at John Toon, and I will say I made a choice to go to a different flight school than your flight school, but that was because I didn't know any better at the time, and I just wanted to publicly apologize. I see the truth now. I did it wrong. But I think it's a really interesting point that I just want to get right into, and this is be a better way, I think, for you to describe what you're doing is to really talk about how you do it. And so, what I wanted to get right into it with you, Jeff, is to say I made this choice of going with you were a newer school at the point. I didn't know anything about aviation or flight schools or how to choose one or anything. Now, with the perspective that I have, I can see how I kind of missed the boat by going with somebody that could have been a little bit different. And we've talked about this. You have a real motivation to run a flight school that does things a little bit different and to provide a better experience for people. So, without getting into how did you start flying and how did you start a flight school? I want to get right into how and why did you decide to have a flight school that was different, and what did you see? Where did you see the opportunities to do that?
Sure. So I did have the opportunity to work. I started my flight instructing career at a local flight school, and not necessarily that particular flight school, but just in general, um, we would get kind of what we call transfer students from other flight schools that were around the
Hmm.
area, and where you can see where some of the shortfall was in the flight instruction world, which unfortunately the way it's set up is that's everybody's first, for the most part, flying job. So they're trying to build their time to the airlines, which requires a 1,500-hour minimum. And so you end up getting these people who, a lot of people who shouldn't be in this job. They shouldn't be teaching people how to fly because they don't have the patience. They don't have the ability to transfer knowledge in the way that people who truly have the heart of a teacher.
Mm.
So I was seeing a lot of people come through that they had done zero groundwork. They didn't know how to set things up appropriately. There was just a huge gap I felt like in the flight instruction world that needed to be met. This stuff is expensive. This is an expensive hobby, and some would argue that it's dangerous. Obviously, as pilots, we know that there are inherent risks, and we do what we can to mitigate those risks. But um, there are dangers that we need to address, and I don't feel like, in general, I felt like the Nashville flight instruction world was
Hmm.
missing the boat in a lot of areas. So I started my company. I was coming out of a job that was it was a charter gig. I left the flight instruction job to go do that, and as some of you may know, that's a pretty rough gig as far as the scheduling goes. And so I left the job, and I had to go back to flight instruction. And so I had two forks in the road. I could go back to working for another flight school, or I said I've always wanted to own a business, and why don't I just give this a shot? I wouldn't have to. I could do things kind of my way, and um, and so with that, I had access to one Cessna 150, and I taught in that, and I got so busy that I had to hire another instructor, and that airplane got busy. I had to get another airplane. It kind of snowballed. So that was where the opportunity was. It was just I wanted to do things the right way, and I wanted to kind of direct um, the activities of a team so that we were, as a team, doing better flight
Yeah.
instruction. That's the crux of all of it.
I think you made a huge point there that, I mean, I come from, my mother was a teacher, my wife is a teacher. I really have a pretty intrinsic understanding of how hard it is to teach anything, and what an art form that is unto itself. And I find it really interesting that you mentioned that almost right away, that uh, any good teacher is going to say that it's a calling, or it's something that's important to them as a sort of a craft. And I think that one of the big problems with a lot of flight schools is you've got a farm system for people that are coming out of, MTSU programs or whatever. There's nothing wrong with this. I'm just saying for people like us that are not just in that same kind of system, we're all just climbing to the airlines or whatever. We're actually just people that really enjoy flying, and we take it very seriously, but in a different way, maybe. It's a little weird when you're in your 40s or 50s and your instructor is 21 years old and has never fueled a plane before.
Mm-hmm.
Do you find yourself sort of trying to work away from that? Like, how do you choose your instructors?
Yeah, that's a great point. So rewinding a little bit and not getting into too much past detail as you mentioned earlier, but I was a recruiter before this. So I was an accountant and I was a recruiter. And as a recruiter, you kind of gain a lot of, I don't know, in order to be good at that, I was a headhunter. That's what I did in the accounting world. And in order to be good at that, you're interviewing people constantly. And you kind of know the right questions to ask to see how they handle it, and what their personality kind of truly is, and where their weak areas might be. And for me, I kind of knew what questions to ask in the interviews, but also getting references on people is a huge deal. And so I would have them give me references for 2 past instructors and one. Well, not all of them were coming from past instruction. So anybody who was a past instructor, I would get somebody who they had taught before. And so that was a good way for me to get some insight into a third party telling me, you know, what were they good at, and what were some of the things that maybe they could focus on. Are they coachable? And that's the big key word for this industry, is somebody coachable. And I would not lead them into saying that word. I would just gather from what they were saying, try to get what they're trying to tell me without it. And that's what I did as a recruit. And that's kind of what's led to being able to hire good quality instructors. And that's what it all starts with. I mean, I give all the credit in the world I brag on my instructors all the time.
Yeah.
They are awesome. And I think, Ryan, you've worked with one or two of them, and could probably vouch for that. But they are the reason for our success. And it comes down to just hiring the right people.
Yeah. And so, Chris, you're, not running a flight school, but you're running a club. I mean, you have to do the same kind of thing, right? Like in terms of vetting and all that.
Yeah, and we've been really fortunate. So, it is that common disclaimer that anytime we bring this topic up, I like to say, like, our club does not offer flight instruction, but we do have 3 or 4 instructors in our club who are authorized to give instruction in our club airplanes to student members. And we're in a kind of unique situation in that right next door to us, there's the Fairmont State University has an aviation program, a Part 141 school, that are turning out pilots out of their flight school. And a lot of those kids that are going through that program go the instructor route. And so we kind of have a built-in pipeline where we have a relationship with the school, and we know these people, and we can get pretty good leads that way. And we've been really, really fortunate that the instructors that we've had that have joined our club, we do have an opportunity to get to know them beyond just they have the certificate. So, that's, check the box and bring them on. There is a vetting process here, for that too, before we're just going to authorize somebody. But it is a unique situation. Like 2 of our instructors right now aren't yet 21. It's like somebody joked the other day, one of our guys who's older took his check ride. And he's like, I didn't think I'd be taking lessons and getting signed off, getting my private pilot certificate from an instructor who I couldn't have a celebratory beer with yet. But we have been really, really fortunate to have some very, very, very safety conscious, very they take it seriously in all the right ways, and they're not just out here to build their hours that they need, to move on. They take the instruction part very seriously. In fact, one of them's pulling up in our 172 right now with a student. So it's yeah, we've been pretty lucky in that way, and it's been really neat to talk. But I got mine from an instructor that taught at that school, but I was his first and then subsequently his only Part 61 student. So we've had a lot of discussions kind of about the difference between the curriculum and how that varies between a 141 and a 61 curriculum.
Yeah, and you mentioned a key point there is personality. I mean, that's what it is. You're going to be spending, let's just say the average is 60 hours for flight training to get your private pilot license. That's a lot of time to spend in a really small airplane with somebody. So the fact that you mentioned somebody you could go get a celebratory beer with, is this somebody I want to be cooped up in a cockpit with for 60 hours? And that's kind of how I feel like I've done well with hiring. And also, I mean, it's the little things that matter too. If you look at the way somebody presents a resume, I can, again, as a recruiter, I did a lot of that, and maybe it's judgy, but you get a resume, you can just tell by someone put some time and effort into this product that they want a potential employer to see. So that's a big deal. That's kind of
if they're misspelling words, right? It's like there's an attention to detail when it matters that is being displayed there. That's my pet peeve is spelling.
Or is it multiple? Is it just one font with no bold? I mean, I don't know.
Right.
At the same time, if that's how they're going to treat their resume, that's how they're going to treat your customers. That's how they're going to treat your airplanes, and you easily weed out that way.
Yeah.
Real quick, just to interject this off topic, but Indy Tri-Pacers in the chat tonight we like to celebrate these things. All your info really helped me pass my private check ride last Tuesday at the age of 57.
Wow.
You really inspired me. So congratulations to Indy Tri-Pacer. That's awesome.
That is awesome. Does he fly a Tri-Pacer is the question.
That would be a valid follow-up.
The Tri-Pacer, like one of the only airplanes I can afford to buy all of.
Exactly. One Dog Geek has a really good question for Jeff. Is this the format, Brian? We're just going to throw these out
I've got other questions, but I mean, everybody's got questions.
How would you recommend that new students who know nothing about how to pick an instructor navigate the process of picking an instructor?
That is a great question. And to the point I just made, you're going to be in a small space with the same person for a long time. The easiest way to do that is just going to be to fly with multiple for at least a little bit. Not too many. I mean, just pick out, narrow it down to 2 or 3, and then do your first couple lessons, maybe your first 6 or so. Go up with both of them, or if you wanted to try a third, then do that. But you're going to get a sense pretty quickly for if they can really cater to your learning style. And again, as a flight instructor, as a teacher in general, everybody learns differently. And so it's all about, how do I get through to this person? Some people are visual learners, some people are hands-on learners, some people need you to demonstrate a maneuver 3 or 4 times before they go and do it. So does this person pick up on my learning style, or do they like to really be hands-on themselves and keep their hands on the controls and not allow me to really see, am I doing that, or is my flight instructor doing that? I get a lot of that feedback from students who either come from other flight schools or just talking in general about some of my colleagues. I've heard people say, well, that person is too hands-on. I need somebody who will allow me to mess up or to progress into a mistake so that I can see if I can get out of it on my own. And as a flight instructor, everybody has their different ways of doing that. And some people won't let you do that. Some people are very tight. And I will say you'll probably get that more with newer flight instructors, less dual given time. You'll get someone who's a little bit more nervous. Obviously, they're the pilot in command. they're responsible for that airplane making it down in one piece and for you making it down in one piece. And so a lot of times you'll see people get away from that as they get more flight time, but that's not taking away from anything from people who are lower time. You can still have great instructors who are lower time. I would say more than that, try to find somebody who fits, who you feel can get through to your learning style, whatever that may be. And I mentioned a couple of examples just now. So that's how I would say it's personality more than anything else. And are they impatient? Because when you're first doing those first couple of flights, you're doing things that you've never experienced before. You're in a literally you're in a three lane that you have to control all three axes at the same time. There's a lot going on. You're probably not going to hear 90% of what your instructor says because you're going to be death gripping that airplane, trying to keep it flying. Although, by the way, it will fly itself. But you just want to you want to make sure that you're not going to get somebody who's impatient with you, and there's going to be plenty of opportunity for them to be impatient with you in those first 10 hours or so. So I would say use that first 10 hours as your kind of phase to picking a flight instructor. Use 2 or 3 and just kind of pick up on what works best for you.
Yeah, somehow I only had one instructor through the whole thing. It just kind of worked out for me. He did get impatient with me sometimes, but not really, kind of. But I can totally understand why, because I'm sure that I was a handful as a student. I'm sure that I was not easy. All that being said, Jeff, how do you, like, you have so much instruction experience here. Like, how do you, and I know that part of becoming a CFI, they teach you a lot of this, and there's part of the curriculum about this, but in your sort of more personal point of view, how do you, what are the kind of some of the prototypes or the archetypes, I guess is the better word, for the types of students that you get, and then how you modulate perhaps your approach to that student?
Okay, that's a great question. I will say a lot of it is dictated by age.
Yeah, I believe that. That's fair.
This is, it's motor skills. This is, you're trying to train your brain to do something that, like I said, you haven't experienced doing this before. You've got a lot of things going on at once. And when you start training, I would say if you have never flown an airplane before, after your 40s, it becomes more challenging. And it's just because that's the way life is. Things just start breaking down. I mean, I'm 42 and I'm experiencing some of that myself. But, if you start after 40, that's where I've seen a lot of people struggle and take a little bit longer and get a little bit more frustrated after that age. I've had a lot of, and the reason I say that's the other end of that spectrum is I soloed somebody in 6 hours total flight time, who was 18. He had just graduated from high school.
Ugh.
And I mean, this guy, I would tell him what he's doing wrong the first time, and then I'd say, all right, we'll do it again. And he would just nail it every single time. It was crazy. I mean, I've never seen anything like it before. And then, as you work your way up the age scale, unfortunately, I've seen people take a little bit longer and just need more repetition and really more consistency, flying more often in order to knock it out. And that's just the way it is. That's what I would say the most is just, it's dictated a lot by age, just because our brains, they slow down in older age. And so if it just 40s, it just gets a little bit more challenging.
It really is funny how, because I think that this age, the midlife age, right, 40s or 50s, what's weird about it is in probably most other areas of life, we're not necessarily, I feel like my motor skills are equally as good as they were in my head. I'm still in my 20s, and I don't have any reason, right? Like to me, my reflexes seem like they're all the same. And flight training for me was just one big drawn out expensive realization of my own mortality, and that I was under this illusion about myself. And people have heard this before, but I kept joking with my instructor when I said, look, if will you just tell me if I'm a prodigy or not? Because I feel like I might be a prodigy, but we'll see how it goes. And then by the third or fourth lesson, I was like, I'm not a prodigy, am I? He's like, no. Uh, so it was just hard work from there. You had to really just put in the work, and so I think that that's the other side maybe of the midlife pilot, is maybe we don't have the reflexes and we don't get things done maybe as immediately in that way. But I think that where we do tend to pick up the slack is we're all professional in some other area of life. We know what it takes to do something and do something well, and it's work. It's not something that just gets handed to you. And then also we have a fully formed frontal lobe, so we understand consequences and risk assessment, and we are thinking about putting family in the planes and all this. So we put a lot more maybe gravity than Gosh, if I was 18, it's like send it and see what happens. But yeah, so that's a very interesting.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
I think those challenges can be overcome.
Yeah.
You just got to work harder. I mean, just like anything else, if you have a business and you don't have as much money in the bank as the next guy does, you're going to have to work harder at other things and be better at other things in order to win. In this case, you can really help yourself by maybe getting a full flight simulator or a partial flight simulator at home, or chair flying, that nature, where you're actually building that muscle memory, outside of just coming and spending, $180 an hour while the prop is spinning.
Mm-hmm.
So there are things you can do to bridge the gap.
I was spoiled. I feel like I had an exemplary instructor for my flight training. And I've watched a lot of, you see a lot of things on the internet. He was excellent. And so I started training at 40 and I soloed at 9 hours. Which, hindsight, they talk about being older and having the knowledge though. Like looking back at it now, I think, boy, I'm glad everything went right. Like that's a great thing about, you think, oh yeah, I nailed it. It was beautiful. And I thought, yeah, because everything went exactly to plan. You don't know what you don't know at 9 hours. And it's kind of like, but it was a great experience. And I do attribute your flight simulator point was a pretty good one. I think I attribute a lot of my early success to the fact that I had thousands and thousands probably of flight simulator hours at home, including, with ATC stuff. I mean, I had studied a lot. I was doing VATSIM before it was cool. And then later on Pilot Edge, I had to subscribe. I was doing all of the things. And so when I got on the plane, they kept saying, I can't believe you said you're doing all the radios from your first lesson. I said, well, yeah, I don't even have to think about that. I mean, that's the part that's just already natural. And I think that really helped me because students get so, especially some of these older guys who are starting now, like get so hung up on like, it takes 100% of their attention to like think about a call and make it like, and I was fortunate to I literally did not have to think about that through my entire training. And I think that took a huge burden off.
Yes. Radio calls are just one more thing that you have to do. It's more workload that you have to do, which is what distracts you from what you need to be doing, which is flying the airplane. And actually, not to get, again, back too much into history, but how I got to this and what made me want to do this. I was a flight sim geek myself. Growing up, I had every version of Flight Simulator from the 90s up through whenever they stopped making. I think it was 2016. But I had VATSIM as well, and I think my best friend, who's probably on the podcast listening, he and I would geek out and we'd fly from Los Angeles to Las Vegas, and we'd be on with ATC. But I wasn't even a pilot then, and so you can understand. You got the radio work. It was those were real ATC controllers, or they were trained at least.
Right.
A lot of them were real ATC controllers, and so you actually got real world experience on the radio, and knocking that out before you start flying takes a huge workload off. That makes you have to think about it less.
Yeah, I think simulators, like they become very helpful when you're working on instrument and some other things, but there's less of that when you're working on the primary flight stuff. But because it was shocking to me the first time I got in a real airplane after and I would fly jets because they were fun, but also I did a lot of 172 simulator flying because I knew I wanted to do this and it was important. So the flying, not so much. Like the actual mechanics, because the throw of the yoke is way smaller than the real thing, and everything's not. It's not. I got in a real airplane and was like, that this doesn't feel at all like that felt. But like, how about knowing where everything was and like how the systems work and where the instruments were and like what, like just that familiarity when you sit down in a real airplane for the first time is kind of like, well, I have a head start that I didn't even. I mean, when I started simming years ago as a kid, I never thought when I was 40 I would do this, but I thought, man, what an
Yep.
advantage that gives you just to have that kind
Yep.
of basic knowledge. Now, I didn't know a lot of things. I had a lot of wrong impressions of things and whatever, but I knew where everything was and like how what it all was, and we got to skip a lot of that. You know what I mean? That
You're like, there's no
kind of
density altitude in this simulator.
right. What the heck?
Yeah, and I'll piggyback on that point. The simulator is it's okay for private pilot training. I would say it's really good if you have like a full like rudder, yoke, throttle quadrant, so that you can kind of, where do my hands need to be, where do my feet need to be, where do my eyes need to be, all at the same time. If you don't have that, really all it's good for on private is, like you said, where the panel is, and okay, well, here's the alternator battery switch, here's the magnetos, here's the primer, and you can actually go, you can go do your flight lesson, and your instructor will teach you maybe flows or whatever for doing a run up, but you can do a run up right there on flight sim when you go home, and you can, okay, well, that's what he was talking about. There's the magnetos. Okay, if I go this way, the magnetos drop. So you can kind of experience that, and you can do it in your own time. You can pause it, but landing isn't very realistic for flight simulators. But it's perfect for instrument training. It's really good. I couldn't fly an arc until I did flight simulator, because it just slows it all down. You can pause it, you can back it up. But I had art to save my life until I did that, and just, okay, so this is what he's saying. I need to twist 10, turn 10. So that's where you get a lot of proficiency with instrument training is with simulators. So I would recommend it for instrument, but not so much for private.
So Jeff, I understand that you pretty much know everything and you've never made any mistakes, which is, I think that's great. But I want to hear, because I know I have one of these in my head. Chris, I imagine you probably do too, but I like to hear failures. So Jeff, what do you have in your mind, what is the worst landing that you've ever had?
Okay. Yes, I do have that in mind.
See, it doesn't take long, right?
Yeah. So the worst landing was, I had gone to Knoxville, Tennessee grad, and I'd gone to a football game that weekend. And it was Sunday, and the winds were projected to be really high in Nashville later in the day. And it was one of those things where I was probably maybe 10 or 15 hours after I got my private. I had an airplane. I was fortunate enough to have an airplane. And I was coming from Knoxville, coming westbound. I was checking all the METARs along the way, just trying to get a gauge for are the winds picking up, or are they staying steady. This is one of those days I probably shouldn't have taken off. And probably one of those days that I called my flight instructor after it, and he used the word, and maybe you've heard this wisdom before, but it's, you took a pinch from the bag of luck and you put it in the bag of wisdom, and you hope that the bag of wisdom fills up before the bag of luck runs out. And that's probably the first time I experienced it, because when you get your license, you're free to go when you want to. This was a day where I didn't adhere to my personal minimums, and so I was probably in Crossville at that point. I was radio ahead towards Smyrna, which is where the airplane was based, and the winds were getting beyond the limitations of the airplane. It was probably about a 15 to 20 knot crosswind in Crossville, which is where I actually, Upper Cumberland Regional, Sparta, which is where I ended up landing. And so 15 knots is the limit for a 172, which is what this airplane was. and it was probably gusting to 20 as far as full crosswind. And I went around 3 or 4 times, and I was death gripping. I thought, this is it. I'm into something I can't get out of. And so the 5th time I touched down, and I was side loaded. I was all the things you're not supposed to be. And fortunately, the airplane just kind of settled down. I was going slow enough to where it didn't run off. I didn't lose control, but definitely learned a lot that day. That's my worst landing.
It's just, there's that feeling of just, I know what you're talking about. I had kind of a similar experience, but it was kind of thing where I was flying out to to Texas, and by the time I got to where I was going, it's like, this is like, it's not gonna, it was a time of day where it's like nothing's going to get any better. It's only going to get worse. I went around once, and that was just sort of like, I hate, there's nothing I hate more than that feeling that you're talking about there, where it's like, you're kind of you feel like you're a passenger,
Yep.
you're not in 100% control of what's going on, because you just don't have enough experience or whatever it is. And even sometimes still, you're like, you have those mental sort of, I don't know, little shockwaves or lapses of just like delayed reactions or whatever. But even if it's just 50 milliseconds of, I'm not in total control here at that stage, is really frightening. But yeah, it sounds like you worked it out, and then
Well, yeah, you start thinking about like, what are they going to tell my mom?
yeah.
He couldn't have been flying,
Yeah.
You're like, I hope they change the METAR real quick. Yeah. So no, but
I
that's
always joke with my students that I want to be like my dying in an airplane story to be like I was like fighting a dragon and rescuing a baby, and
yeah,
not like something stupid.
yeah. Like, yeah, I just had to pee. So there was a question a little bit further down, Chris, that our friend David Moscadelli asked, that I think is a good one. He just did his biannual flight review, and he based it all on AQP, and went through all of that with his instructor, and was talking about how it's sort of uncomfortable and fun. I guess I was curious, Jeff, especially for people like us, right? Where we're not necessarily like, we're going for different ratings, and a lot of us are instrument rated, or working on it. But there's certain levels of, I'm sure you would agree, right? Like that the baseline for currency does not even come close to what proficiency actually is. And there's not a lot of things to really force you to elevate your skills once you kind of got your ratings. It's up to you to sort of manage it. And I feel like that the AQP protocol is pretty good for that. Are you familiar with it? And what do you think about it?
You'll have to fill me in. I'm not sure what that is.
So
Stump
Go
the
ahead.
instructor.
No, it's kind of a couple YouTube. It's
grassroots aviation advanced. It's basically taking a lot of things from the airlines and bringing them to general aviation. So it has to do with things you probably already do. It's just a format, right? Like putting people through loss of thrust on takeoff, putting people through, it's just
they've taken real world, like where people kill themselves is a lot,
Okay.
and made that kind of the impetus of the flight review.
Yeah.
Like taking it's practical, it's very, very practical stuff. Like judging someone's aeronautical decision making and their pre-flight prep, rejected takeoffs, loss of thrust after takeoff, loss of AHRs in flight, if that's a thing, loss of speed awareness. They talk a lot about that kind of thing.
If you're not familiar with it, it's not a big deal.
No,
yeah.
I have my answer. That's great. That is kind of how I run my flight reviews. You can go through and do all the slow flight, stall, steep turns that you want, but at the end of the day, is that really moving the needle? Is that making that person a better pilot? I like my VFRs to be a learning event, and they should be. It shouldn't necessarily be a pass fail. So a lot of what I would do is fly up just out to the practice area, and then we'll do a steep turn or two. And then I'll have them say, so hopefully at that point they're a little disoriented. And then I say, okay, well, take me to the nearest airport. All right. So then they're kind of, then the nearest airport happens to be like 8 miles away. So can they, under pressure, can they make quick decisions? Can they prioritize their workload? And then I'll give them an engine failure when they're about 5 miles out within gliding distance to see how they decide what to do with that situation.
I'm writing all this down, so if I do my flight review with you, Jeff, I'm writing all this
down. So then they get to kind of learn from that. In a flight review, I'm basically seeing, are they safe to go up? Would I allow them to go up with somebody that I care about? So how would they handle that situation? And if they didn't handle it well, we talk about it. And then also, you just mentioned loss of thrust on takeoff. I like to go up and do, all right, let's do the impossible turn. Everybody talks about it. Have you ever done it before? So we'll go do, try the impossible turn at a quiet airport where there's not a whole lot going on. So 1,000 feet AGL, of course, they kind of know it's coming already. Simulated engine failure. So they have to make a turn and see if they can make it back. Then we'll do one at 1,500 feet, and then we'll do one at 700 AGL, and just see how it turns out. And then also simulated engine failures en route, kind of like I mentioned just now at the beginning, just so that you're just not practicing those things on a daily basis and outside of a training environment. So that's what a BFR is for you to go back and review the things that you had to perform on in your check ride. And so that's what the BFR should really be about. So I like this AQR idea. I'll have to look it up.
Yeah. AQP. Yeah, it is interesting.
What does it stand for?
Why do you ask me things that it's just like, Brian, I watched your face as soon as he said AQP. That's how I went and loaded it real fast. I was like, I'm going to be advanced qualification program. Yeah. I'll put a link. I'll put a link in the chat. Somebody who really pushed it pretty hard was Josh Flowers, the Aviation 101 YouTube channel, and he's actually made a really nice. I'm talking about a 44-page document that is pretty detailed, and I think it's a pretty common sense approach, really. And I've read it and looked through all this material before, but I'll put a link in the chat for everyone that wants to check it out.
So Jeff, I have a question about. We're kind of just getting back to sort of the flight school part of this, but
yep.
Frequency change. Like I said, the plane that I was flying and with Adam and some others, we had sort of a small cohort of people that were renting from an owner, and you were sort of overseeing that plane for people that were not necessarily training, and we could take the plane on trips and do things like that. I don't know anybody else that's doing anything like that. I hope that you find a way to do it again, because that's, to me, a gaping absence in the market, at least in this region, where you're up against a 2-year, 3-year waiting list to get into a flying club, or you're flying flight school rentals, and there's not a whole lot of in between for people that are not prepared to go and just buy a plane. So do you have plans to build out something like that a little bit more concertedly, or was that maybe something that was a little bit more experimental? And the reason why I mention all this is because ultimately you're an accountant, you're a business owner, and you know the bottom line of those things better than I would. For me, I'm the consumer. I'm like, this is awesome. But for you, maybe it wasn't. I don't know. Or maybe that's something that you want to do tweaks to.
Yeah, sure. So that program was, for all intents and purposes, it was for what you just described. We don't get our licenses so that we can go buzz around the pattern and do slow flight. So we get it to go places. So where can you do that? Anywhere near here? Nowhere. So I did start that program as a way for people to be able to do that without using our flight school airplanes they're being used for training every day. Obviously, we're a business, and we have to do what we're in business to do. So that was a great option. and frankly, it wasn't a whole lot of profit to me, but it was recognition of our flight school. It brought recognition to us, even though there were only 4 people in the club. The plan was to expand that further and bring on other aircraft. There was already a wait list of like 8 people who wanted to be in that airplane when it flipped over. So yeah, there are plans to do it. It's just finding. I know that there are owners out there who want to participate. I just have to find them. And to that point, Brian, you and I know of a local charity. It was an event that you and I went to recently. I'm trying to incorporate that mission into that program. I really want to get involved with that, and I think that is a super mission, like a great mission for someone who wants to go out and do good with their flying skills, is to have access to an airplane for that explicit purpose.
Oh, that's great.
That's kind of my next plan.
So we can just briefly just tell everybody. A lot of people already know about this, and I've brought a lot of people in. A lot of people here, thank you. You've already donated to Freedom Aviation Network and offered your services as a pilot all over the country. We've got people in here that have already raised their hand for them, which is great. But that's what Jeff is talking about here. And so, yeah, if you could actually have, imagine, like this sort of dedicated fleet, right? Like, how cool would that be?
Yep. And it would just be, the owner, just like the owner that we had in the last case, basically has frequency change, manages the airplane, does all the maintenance, et cetera, et cetera. But you have people leasing the airplane for that purpose. And to my understanding, I actually just spoke with Stephanie today, and she said that they have more pilots and they're getting busier. So the missions are there, and it's just how do we provide the resources for those missions to be executed.
That is really awesome. And then, as far as the school that you're running and the way that you're doing things a little bit differently, if we've got a lot of people in here that are from this area, but we got a lot of people that are all over the country. But I mean, I can see a lot of reason why people would want to come from a lot of places. I mean, Nashville's a destination. If people wanted to come here and do a flight review with you, right? Because they've gotten to know you here, or or with one of your instructors, or if somebody wanted to be a part of it, and we wanted to sort of raise our hands and say frequency change aviation, I'd love to do something with you guys. Either I want to get my license or I want to get another rating. What do people do? What's the next step? Just go to the website, or just like look up your address, or what should people do?
The website's probably the best resource. There are forms there online where you could submit the type of training that you're looking for, or just like a contact me sort of form where you can put in your name, number, and email. Happy to field or put my email address out there as well if anybody wanted to call the office. Either of those 3 methods would be just fine.
Cool. Yeah. I mean, I think that it's easy. Just being a pilot is really hard. Then to be a pilot and then also a business owner of any kind is really hard. To be a pilot, a business owner that chooses to be a business owner in the field of aviation, exponentially hard. And then to do that in a way where you've been able to grow this thing and continue to build trust and deliver on the experience for people. I think that you're conscientiously building something that I think, and we haven't even touched on, the Cirrus training and, the full scale sort of experience that, transition training, all the other things that you offer. It actually might be a really cool thing. We've got some Cirrus folks. It might be cool to have you back at some point to really just dig down into the Cirrus world, because I think there's a lot of people that I'm not in that world, but I know that a lot of people are, and so you have a lot more experience, I guess, to and things to offer to people than what we've talked about here. But I do hope people reach out and and connect with you. And you've always been very, very good to me. And I've enjoyed flying with you. And you know, I will say that when you're a newer pilot, you can really tell what the instructor is thinking, especially if they're an instructor that hasn't flown with you very much, by how they have their hand, sort of, they do the hand sort of at the ready thing, like right on the cowling. You know how you do that? It's like,
my favorite is the hand just behind the yoke, not touching it, but trying to make sure you don't plant the nose wheel in it. Like they're just always ready to like guard it. That's
right.
how you know.
It's only until you see like the instructor's hand in their lap that you know you've done anything, right? So I look forward to flying with you again one day and getting your hand off the cowling and in a relaxed position.
No, I feel like when we flew together, I don't think I touched the controls.
Okay.
Oh, kudos to you.
Yeah, right. So but anyway, so Chris, I guess you can send us out. Everybody knows how to get in touch with Jeff. And Jeff, thanks for
what is the website? Can you give us a website real quick?
Yes, it's just frequencychangeaviation.com.
Perfect.
Oh, by the way, that's one more thing I want to throw at you, Jeff, is that early on in the chat, somebody was saying that it damn well better be true that when people pass their check ride through frequency change, that they get a frequency changed approved t-shirt. So if you're not offering those, you should do that.
Actually, it's funny you say that. I'm having my 12-year-old daughter. She's actually pretty good at art. I'm having her design a t-shirt that we can use for something like that. But we do get free advertising at John Toon every time you leave the classic Delta Aerospace. It's frequency change approved. We have been approved.
Smart.
Oh, that's awesome. Smart move. Yeah.
Well, man, we really appreciate it. I'm glad Brian made the connection. This has been super informative. We always love having people that are smarter than us on, which is not hard necessarily, but it's always enlightening to get different perspectives from folks who've just done so many things. And you definitely have it going on in Nashville. So I do hope we get to talk again sometime. We'll find another topic and just knock it out. But it was great having you. For everybody who's thanks for joining us in the chat room. We record these podcasts every other Wednesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern on the Midlife Pilot YouTube channel. And it's great to interact with all of our folks in there. And like Brian likes to say, click the things, do the things. If you haven't subscribed to the audio podcast or your favorite podcast player, please do that, especially on Apple. It helps us tremendously. Leave a rating and a review if you don't mind. Helps get, really what it does, it helps other folks like us who may not know the show exists find it and be part of this awesome community that is kind of built around this idea of aviation isn't just for kids anymore. And we're proving that every time.
Hey, by the way, we've pierced the top 10 of aviation podcasts in the United States. It kind of fluctuates there, so it'll go between 10 and 20, and then all this. So if the more people press buttons and do things and share things, the more we get some vague sense of satisfaction out of being better than other people, which is really what it's all about.
I mean, I'm glad how elegant and kind-hearted of you to put it forward.
It's very benevolent.
I'm like, let's build the community of people like us, and Brian's like, that makes us, we're better than.
We must win.
Yes, victory. All right, everybody. Thanks for joining us in the live stream. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you again in 2 weeks on the Midlife Pilot podcast.
And Jeff, hang out. We'll be right back.